It seems like every minute, another shoe drops for Joe Biden. Another poll, another leak, another group of Democrats speak out, arguing he should step aside as the party's presidential nominee.
More Democratic lawmakers are abandoning the president.
He may not be the best choice to take on Donald Trump.
It's like talking to a loved one about such a tough situation. How do you tell that person he can't do this anymore?
I believe the right thing for him to do is to step aside.
So far, Biden has insisted he's in it for the long haul, and his staffers say it's too late to replace him anyway. So, is it? Technically, no, but the path is narrow. Let's go through it. Over the past few days, some Democrats have argued the DNC rules won't allow Biden to be replaced this late in the game. Others say, well, that's actually not true. In order to parse out these arguments, we need to start with the basics. Right now, Joe Biden is the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party. But in order to become the formal nominee, the majority of his party's delegates still need to vote for him. And that happens at the party's convention in August.
Those delegates come from all 50 states, and they will gather together and they will choose who their presidential nominee is.
If you're not super familiar with this process, here's how it works. Every state in the US holds a presidential primary to help choose a candidate to represent their party in the general election. Delegates are the group of people in charge of moving the next part of the process along. These are party loyalists, handpicked to represent their state. And their main job is to go to their political party's convention where the presidential candidate is officially nominated and push forward the person that their state backed in the primaries. In this case, that's Joe Biden.
When the incumbent announces, I'm running for re-election, the party tends to back him, and there tend to be very few serious challengers to his candidacy.
President Biden has won 99% of the delegates that were divvied up according to the primaries.
At the convention, delegates literally call out their votes on behalf of the states they represent, one by one in alphabetical order.
Indiana, you have 92 votes.
How do you cast your votes?
43 votes for Senator Bernie Sanders and 48 votes for the next president of the United States, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
They do this over and over until somebody gets a majority. But here's the thing. Delegates don't go to a party convention completely free to vote for whoever they want. As we mentioned, their job is to push forward the person their state backed in the primaries. And there's actually a process in which they pledge to do this in advance.
But the Democratic rules formally say that delegates are supposed to vote in good conscience the views of those who sent them along. So while they're not bound, they have this pre-existing commitment.
Which means that most of the time, these party conventions are seen as a formality, a way for the party's staunchest supporters to very publicly rally around their chosen leader and really kick off the campaign. But what happens if Biden's name isn't on that list this year? What happens if he drops out before the convention begins? If Joe Biden drops out before the convention, he essentially surrenders all the pledges he gained through the primary season, and the convention bursts wide open.
An open convention means you go into the convention without anyone having a majority of delegates and without anyone knowing for sure who the nominee will be.
The last time we saw an open convention was in 1968, when sitting President Lyndon Johnson struggled in the primaries and decided he wasn't going to run again. The purpose of the convention then became not to confirm a nominee, but to select one. And in theory, there's no reason why this couldn't happen again.
Let's say Joe Biden withdraws and releases his 3,896 pledged delegates. Then the party has to figure out what to do next. You can't go and redo the primaries. There's no time. The Biden delegates are going to have to decide whom to choose.
Here's how that might work, according to the analysts we spoke to. Say Biden dropped out of the race tomorrow. Most likely, a handful of Democrats would come out of the woodwork and announce they're running for the nomination. The DNC could then invite those people to officially register as a nominee.
You can imagine the hardest part will be, how do you winnow down the number of potential candidates to a manageable number? The party's going to have to decide how to do that.
Once they do, the confirmed candidates would then have just over a month to launch a campaign and make their case to those delegates. Because remember, the moment Biden steps down, all of his delegates become unpledged. They're basically free agents and can support whoever they want.
There is no standard operating procedure, no SOP for what to do if the presumptive nominee drops out.
Several influential Democrats have suggested that there be 3 or 4 debates among those who want to run,
which would give the delegates an opportunity to figure out who their favorite was.
So in this scenario, the delegates would vote one by one, same as always. And if no one wins a majority in the first round, it goes to a second ballot. And that's where the superdelegates come in.
Just to give you a sense of the numbers, the Democratic Party has 4,672 delegates. 3,933 of them are pledged delegates. You think, well, wait a second, who are these other people? These other people are unpledged superdelegates.
The superdelegates, since they were instituted several decades ago, have mainly been the members of Congress, both houses, the governors of that party, only party members, obviously, and occasionally other officials. There may be several statewide elected officials that are included in the call.
Superdelegates are free to vote for whoever they want. They don't get to vote in the first round because they have an outsized influence, but they do get to vote in every other round. And there's no limit to how many rounds this process can go on for.
It would draw a very broad audience, but at a considerable cost. When people run against one another, their worst instincts come out, and they're going to use every scintilla of negative information they can gather. So it's something both parties have tried to avoid and really have in modern times.
So, in theory, an open convention could turn into a mini nomination contest. But if Biden decided instead that he wanted to endorse a particular candidate to avoid this kind of conflict, analysts say all those delegates pledged to Biden would most likely fall in line.
The delegates do not have to listen to an endorsement from a candidate. They can vote their conscience. But again, if you have the incumbent president who's stepping down and endorsing his vice president, I think that's going to be an extremely strong signal for the overwhelming number of delegates in that convention to choose Harris as the nominee.
As of right now, Joe Biden still says he's not going anywhere.
If any of these guys don't think I should run against me, go ahead, announce for president. Challenge me at the convention.
Challenge me at the convention? Well, what exactly does that mean? If Biden stays in the race, how could someone challenge him at the convention when, like we said, all of these delegates have already pledged to vote for him? Well, some states do actually have laws mandating delegates cast their votes according to that pledge. But for most, there's no official penalty if they decide to vote differently. Party rules simply say that delegates shall in all good conscience reflect the sentiment of those who elected them.
For Democrats, the delegates are pledged, but they are not bound.
In theory, some delegates could vote for someone other than Biden at the convention. This would be pretty unprecedented because, again, they'd be going against what they promised to do. But analysts say all of this is unprecedented.
We're in truly uncharted waters when we talk about a presumptive nominee who's an incumbent president who's being asked not to run.
If somehow enough delegates got together and decided to vote against Biden at the convention and actually stopped him from getting a majority on the first ballot, we'd enter what's known as a brokered convention.
A brokered convention is where nobody can get a majority of delegates on the first round of votes. And that would mean it has to go to a second or subsequent round of votes.
It's called a brokered convention because of what happens next. Say Biden doesn't win a majority on the first ballot. That would kick off a complex series of negotiations led by so-called power brokers from the states. These could be like governors, senators, or big city mayors, anyone with the power to persuade delegates to vote for another candidate that eventually they can all agree on. And if this sounds messy, that's because it is.
And that means that the delegates are brokering, they're exchanging deals, they're trying to barter with each other. Maybe you say, I'll drop out and support you if you agree to give me this kind of position, or if you agree to try to add this to the party platform, or whatever it might be. And we haven't seen this happen in the United States in 70 years.
The longest brokered convention was back in 1924, when Democrats took 17 days and 103 rounds of voting to nominate diplomat John W. Davis. Now, to be clear, although it's not impossible for this to happen, according to the analysts we spoke to, it's very unlikely a challenger will emerge without the support of the party itself.
It's politically very dangerous to challenge the incumbent. If you come at this candidate and try to show this divisive showing on the floor but fail, all you've done is weaken your own candidate by suggesting there's this internal dissension and struggle rather than a showing of solidarity and strength. So I just think it's exceedingly unlikely that anyone would do it.
Okay, let's throw one more wrench in the works. If Biden stays the course, officially wins the nomination, and then steps down, maybe because of health reasons or the polls suggest he simply can't beat Trump, well, there's a process for that too. But it's arguably the most controversial.
It would probably leave a lot of voters pretty shaken that this person would go all the way through the nomination process only to pull out hours or days afterward.
At this point, according to party rules, the choice lies with a small group of powerful DNC members. They come up with a nominee, and the National Committee votes on it. No primaries, no delegates. Just a few elected and appointed party members deciding whose name is on the ballot.
Probably have a bad taste in the mouth of many to say that a handful of officials and unelected officials in the party get to choose who their party's candidate is going to be rather than leaving it to the political process.
Look, bottom line, no one can really be sure how this would work, or even if it will happen. Joe Biden may remain unchallenged. The only guarantee for Democrats now is that any change to the status quo is going to be messy and complicated. But at least some Democrats say it may be worth the mess.